I'll try some of this CRC Lectra clean. And we'll see if that does the job. It's definitely loose in there, it just does not want to lift out of that recess. Well, you can see that solvent working, being sucked down into there. Oh, there we go. I saw that flip up, that's ready to come out. There we go. I've got it off in an undamaged state. So that's good, that's the target, that's what we needed to achieve. Zoom you back out, you see nothing. That's better. So the front of the camera, we've got 4 screws holding the front of the camera on. One here down that hole, and that's quite reluctant to move. That's this post, and 3 countersunk head screws. And the front should lift off, and it does. There we have it. So here's our camera body. You can see the meter cord here. There's the cocking shaft. Now this cord goes here. Is it that way? I can never remember. Yeah, something like that. I'll show you how to put all that together once we get to that stage. Right, I'll pop that body apart away for a second. I just want to have a quick look at this shutter. And it's just gummed up. You can see those shutter blades there are quite gummed up. The diaphragm, what's that like? It's just sticky too by the looks of it. It's not as bad. The shutter blade's the main problem. Right, well I better finish taking the body apart because these loose pieces I'll want to get into the ultrasonic cleaner. Get rid of some nasty stuff like this. Thick dried out grease on the top plate here, stuff like that. There's not much of it. This is comparatively clean. There's a bit of sand about in here. Certainly sat down in here. No film chips. That makes a change. So all this needs to be cleaned. Let me remove the meter cord and its drum so that I don't lose them. I'll put that over there. That's the tensioning spring for our meter cord. Right, so the rangefinder coupling arm is here. Now I'll remove that from its pivot. The pivot pin at the top is a screw with a very fine extended shaft on it at the end. It's got a washer underneath it, and that runs into a hole in this arm here. There's a little hole right in the top, so it pivots on that, and likewise there's one at the bottom, much the same. It's very fine. What is that? It looks like less than 0.5 millimeter. this bracket at the base. Oh, we might as well have that out. It's only 2 screws. Right, so there's our bracket, and there's the post, that very fine pin that the rangefinder arm moves on. And this baffle can come out now, and likewise that baffle. And our body casting is stripped down as far as we need to go, I think. I don't think I'm going to remove the leatherette from the back. We'll take that as good. This baffle is just plastic. It's quite vulnerable to solvent. Make sure you keep that well away from any acetone or other stuff. And this is a metal baffle. It's quite important that that's present in there too. Otherwise you end up, from memory, you end up with a bright spot in your image, which is presumably from scattered reflected light. Okay, so these pieces, they can all go into the ultrasonic cleaner now. Even that washer, I think. This piece, I don't think that needs to go through the cleaner. But these pieces certainly do. So I'll get those into the ultrasonic cleaner and come back, start sorting out the body. I've got to clean up the top cover. I've got to replace that plastic disc. I may use that to show you how well that can clean up with some Perspex polish, but I'm going to replace it anyway. But meanwhile, this stuff to the ultrasonic cleaner. This stray adhesive I've got here is coming off well with this CRC heavy duty Lectra clean, and I'll just use that to remove this excess adhesive, just so that I've got nice clean metal to put the leatherettes back on. And I would presume that's the same adhesive that was used to put that little Kodak nameplate in place. And it just went gooey with the acetone and wouldn't let go. Right, I'll work through getting this casting clean. I'd like the body to be nice and tidy, ready for the reassembly process. Well, it's about 10 minutes later. I've got that body clean to my satisfaction now. All the lumps and bumps of adhesive are gone. All the grease and sand and rubbish has gone. The body now is basically ready for the reassembly process, so I'm done with that until I get my other parts back from the ultrasonic cleaner. And of course I've got to look at some of these other components with a view to cleaning them up as well, and I might as well start here. Here I've just got one of my rubber friction tools, which is a good fit for inside that plastic window, and I'm using that to support the plastic window because they tend to be a bit fragile. So I'm just taking some Perspex polish and I'm going to have a go at polishing this window. I probably need to do the inside and the outside, but you can probably hear from the sound of that it's quite sort of a rough sound. That's because the surface is not smooth, and the more I polish that down, the quieter it will get as the surface polishes down dead smooth. This process takes a considerable amount of time and patience in order to get it done, but it does work, and it can be absolutely essential where you've got a plastic viewing window which has been damaged like this has by someone applying some solvent to it to clean it. And I can see by the pattern that it's gone in around the button and on the undersurface of that piece too, so it's just not the top surface I've got to deal with, it's the bottom surface as well. You could probably use an attachment on a Dremel to do this, but one of the things about plastics is that they don't like heat. If you get them hot, the surface effectively softens and melts, and it'll go any way but what you want it, the way you'd like it to go. So I will work away at this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so. I can see an improvement already, until I've got that top surface visibly improved, and then I'll be in a better space to view the underside surface and see what state that's in. So back shortly. Well, I'd like to say that that plastic was perfect now. It isn't, but as you can see, it's a vast improvement. It's actually possible to read those scales quite easily through that window, and to the casual glance, there's nothing wrong with that plastic window at all. I happen to know that if I look at it in a raking light, I can see the imperfections in that surface. Now, they're not the sharp imperfections that they were before, creating all that haze. They're more ups and downs, I'd say. Lumps and bumps, hollows and hills in the plastic. Now, very likely they won't want to polish right down. You'd be polishing down to the valleys in order to see the back of that. I think you'd be there a long time, and I think it'd be quite hard to get an absolutely even flat surface there. But the main problem with the haze is gone. That window's fine now, and unless you knew to look for it, you wouldn't pick that there was a problem there at all. But it's taken me about 20 minutes to get to that stage. Now, that plastic disc fits in a recess here, and the edges have been crimped over in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 or 9 places. 8 places, I'd say, at a guess. And so all of those little crimps have got to be pushed back out, the new plastic disc inserted, and then crimped back over again. It's a bit awkward. Basically, it doesn't want to move back. Brass just doesn't want to go back where it came from. Not neatly anyway. I've got to push all those out with the tip of a screwdriver. The plastic, generally when you're doing this, the plastic is already gone, which is why you're doing it. In this case, I'm doing it because the plastic's no good. And you're probably wondering what it is I'm going to replace them with. Well, it's not an original spare part. It's a polycarbonate disc. I think it's 0.7 millimeters thickness that I have carefully crafted, ready to go in its place. And it's got a piece of plastic either side, so that's why it looks as ugly as sin at the moment. Well, there's the new window in place, and you can see that that's very clear and easy to see through. And being polycarbonate, it shouldn't be as prone to cracking as the original piece of plastic was, which was very likely some styrene, I would imagine. Okay, well, with everything cleaned and ready to go, I think I'll start putting some pieces back in the body. So, I think the order of the day is to start with the easy stuff. So, we'll put the tripod socket back on place. That's 3 correct screws. Of course, if you're pulling one of these apart, you'll be taking great note of what screws came from which place. I don't, because I don't have good working practices. I just throw them all in a heap, sort it out later. But I've done that so long I know where everything goes. Right, get those 3 screws in and do them up tight. at the top of the camera I think I want the rewind shaft in here with its 2 screws, and to put this in I will want a wipe of synthetic grease, I think, into the guide bush. Now, unlike Retina IIIS and various other models, that's a single piece, that rewind. What that means is that you can't raise the knob up higher than the camera top in order to rewind the film. The rewinding has to be done with the rewind knob down against the camera top. And somebody's bound to ask, is it possible to add that feature to a 2S to make it a 2-piece one so that you can lift the knob up? Well, probably. I've certainly done it with a Retina IIIS, I think, before, so most likely it's exactly the same procedure. Take the parts you want from a suitable organ donor and put them in place. That's good. So, what do I want to put in next? Film advanced stuff, I think. So, a wipe of molybdenum paste through the holes in the bottom of the casting. We'll start with the bottom of the camera here. So, a wipe of molybdenum paste there, through the holes in the bottom of the casting where the lock lever and release lever run, and that toothpick has just died, so we'll start with a fresh one. Let's find the parts I want, which is the lock lever first, I think, and I'll get out the release lever while I'm here. And the lock lever, for that we need the spring. There are 2 springs that look very much the same. The shorter one here and the finer wire, that's for the lock lever. Put the lock lever in the casting at the bottom, all the way through to the top. Fit the chosen spring in place, and holding that down with my thumb, I can pick up the clip fit that in place in the groove. Whoops, don't drop it. Like that. Clip it into place. So that's now nicely sprung loaded. And turn my attention to the release lever. Now the release lever has a small spring on the base which acts to keep it in contact with the cam on the bottom of the film advance shaft. And the spring is slightly distorted, I can see, and I'm sure it doesn't have anything to do with the way I wrestled it off the lever. Let me just get that setting as I want it. Now I've got to get this back on the lever. Of course you won't be able to see any of this probably because I still haven't got the see-through fingers. There it is. That's sitting in position. I'll slide it into place, get it lined up with a hole in the casting at the top. Make sure that spring doesn't get trapped in there and get damaged, like it was busy trying its best to get damaged. Alright, I'll support that with my finger from underneath. Put the spring on the top. Find the screw. And hopefully get that started. Well, that was clever. Okay, I'll find those bits. Well, a fat lot of good sweeping the floor with the magnet did. I got the spring quick enough, but I had to rely on hearing. The screw hit the magnet because it was a brass screw. This is always entertaining. Today's being a bit worse than usual. Trying to get the screw started into the top of the shaft is awkward because the shaft, of course, is split. And it's a tight fit on the screw, so it's hard to get the screw started. There we go, that's started. I'll run that down till we have what I feel is sufficient tension on that spring. Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. I'm going to have to get the adjustment for that correct later. I did have a win. While I was down sweeping the floor for the pieces I'd lost, I found 2 screws. And one of them I recognised as being lost from a camera I was working on the other day. The other one, I've got no idea where that came from. Probably dropped it there from my spares when I was sorting around looking for pieces. Okay, those pieces are in place, that's the main thing. And here we've got the film advance shaft. I want that, and that's the bush for the bottom of our film take-up spool, which is hiding. There it is. And there'll be 3 screws that we'll need to hold this in place. Right. This, it's a return spring you can see here. This is what winds up and tensions it so that the film advance lever returns to the rest position nicely. I usually lubricate that with some graphite grease. So I'm just pulling back the spring and put some over at the top of that. Pull that bush back up. Roll it backwards and forwards a few times. I like this grease, it's quite tacky. It stays on the shaft. Doesn't just get pushed back out of the way and stop doing its job. Right, now I'll run a bit into the spring itself so that the coils of the spring move smoothly over each other. Just check that that's good. That appears to be fine. Now the ratchets on this, the little teeth here, I usually just use some synthetic grease on those. There are 2 ratchets. There's one that serves for the advance stroke and one that serves for the return stroke. And the way the camera is engineered, you have to swing the advance through a full stroke. You can't inch it. And likewise, when you're returning the lever to the rest position, it has to be done in a single stroke. You can't swing it halfway back and then swing it forward again. Right, so the bush in the bottom of the take-up spool. Put that into the camera. I'll swing the lock lever out of the way. Drop this down to place in the body. Swing the release lever back out of the way. Is it dropped in nicely? It feels like it. I'm just checking that it's sitting nicely on the take-up spool. Sometimes the spring comes out of position and then it doesn't line up correctly. Now this was under some extra tension, as I recall. I'm going to see what it feels like just as I would normally fit it, which is right there, so as to give one full turn of tension on it typically is good. Now with the Retina IIS camera or the reflex cameras, a full turn plus a third of a turn works well. So basically you're giving it a bit extra. But I suspect that this will work okay with one full turn. So I'll get those 3 screws in place, tighten them up. That's the base of that done. At the top, I'll need to be installing my clutch assembly for a start, which means I need to lubricate and assemble the clutch assembly. And the clutch assembly consists of 3 pieces here, and the clutch assembly I will lubricate with some graphite grease again. For much the same reason, it's quite tacky, it stays where it's put, and it's a good lubricant. And the way these are constructed, you get a lot of spring tension from the outside face of this pressing on the inside face of this, and that needs to be controlled. If there's too much friction there, that can start galling the metal. If there was no grease in there at all, it would start galling the metal up. It would start to rub and get rougher, and then you'd end up with far more friction than you started off with. I'm just going to get this spring in place. I use these crimp lug pliers to help me do that. That was all I needed to do. Just check that runs smoothly, and the clutch always moves smoother in one direction and in the other. That's fine. The smooth direction is the right direction, so you can't mess that up. Put that into place in the body. Rotate till it drops in on top of the film take-up spool. Now I'm just going to put this tripod surround underneath here to support the base of the film advance while I'm putting this together, so that I don't push the shaft down and end up disengaging stuff. Right.